Michigan State used to be a dominant football team. During the 2010s, they won the Big Ten championship several times, but in recent years, they've lost their edge. It has been an entire decade since their last Big Ten title, and with the arrival of new faces in the Big Ten, it's becoming even harder to stay competitive. Today, we are rebuilding Michigan State back into a powerhouse that can survive the new Big Ten. So let's get into it. Starting off with season 1, our team is rated at an 83 overall. Leading the offense is sophomore quarterback Aiden Chiles, and at 80 overall, he will likely be our starting quarterback for the next 3 seasons. The wide receiver core is made up entirely of freshmen and sophomores, 70 overalls at best. Our offensive line is utterly atrocious. It will definitely need rebuilt in the years to come. On the other side of the ball, our defense is slightly more promising. They're led by our senior linebacker, Jordan Turner. Our secondary isn't great at the moment, but we are going to work on developing them in the future. At the end of the season, we managed to finish with an 8-4 record. We managed to win most of the easy games, but we really struggled when facing elite teams such as Ohio State. Our toughest loss, however, came at the hands of our biggest rival, Michigan. Last year, this game was an absolute disaster. A 49-0 blowout loss at home. This time, we made it a fight. For 3 quarters, we held our own. The score was 14-7 Michigan heading into the 4th quarter, but a few crucial mistakes by Chiles, and it was over. Michigan took advantage, pulled away, and walked out with a 28-7 win. And just like that, they keep the Paul Bunyan Trophy for another year. But we will be back for it next season. On a positive note, our record landed us in a bowl game, the LA Bowl versus Fresno State. And in this one, Michigan State absolutely dominated. At halftime, we held a 17-7 lead, and by the end, 34-13. The defense played insane as they forced multiple turnovers, locked up Fresno's offense, and set us up to take an early lead and never look back. Heading into the offseason, however, we did bring in quite a few 3-star recruits, and we did manage to land a couple key 4-star recruits. And would you believe me if I told you that this random 3-star running back would end up becoming crucial to our rebuild? More on that later. But the team was reloaded with talent, and we were excited to make some noise going into season 2. And just like that, the first half of season 2 was starting to become a letdown. Around the midway mark, the team had accumulated a mere 5-3 record, and things were not looking promising. As the next game on their schedule, Michigan. And not just any old Michigan, ranked 24th in the nation, Michigan. Yikes. But in a shocking turn of events, this Michigan State team would rally together and absolutely destroy Michigan. Michigan State would score 3 unanswered touchdowns, making the score 21-0 heading into the 3rd quarter. Michigan finally answered back with a huge breakaway run to put them on the board. But Michigan just kept making mistakes and allowed Michigan State to capitalize and push the score to 34-14 in the 4th. Michigan would score once again to narrow the deficit, but at this point, the game was all but over. As Michigan State ran out the clock, they would take a resounding 34-21 victory over their rivals. And just like that, the Paul Bunyan Trophy once again belonged to Michigan State. Not many knew it at the time, but this win would spark a flame in this young team as they would go on to win their next 3 games straight. And they would finish out the season with a 9-3 record. This would prove to be a huge turning point in the rebuild. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be enough to make it into the Big Ten championship, but they were ranked number 11 in the nation, which meant they had snuck into the college football playoffs. Their first game, they were set to face number 6 NC State on the road. The game was neck and neck heading into the second half. Both teams locked at 10 points. Michigan State would rally together a nice drive heading into the 4th quarter, but would ultimately come up short, resulting in a field goal that put them up only by 3 points. NC State would answer back with a drive of their own, but as time winded down, it began to look like they might not have enough time. The Michigan State defense came up huge, getting several key red zone stops and forcing NC State to kick a field goal with only 50 seconds left on the clock, but that was too much time. Michigan State began driving down the field. A few quick passes for huge gains allowed them to be within field goal range in no time. And with only 3 seconds left on the clock, Michigan State would nail the game-winning field goal. And they had done it. They had managed to win a tough road playoff game, and they were moving on to the next round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, however, their next opponent was not going to be easy. They were slated to go up against number 3 Texas A&M. A tough matchup for sure, but Michigan State was on a hot streak, and they were not to be underestimated. Texas A&M would take an early 7-0 lead, but heading into the 2nd quarter, Michigan State would answer back with a touchdown run up the middle to even the score. Texas A&M's offense would explode, scoring twice, resulting in a 21-7 lead going into halftime. Michigan State got the ball back to start the second half, and they would mount another drive down the field and cap it off with a Nate Carter touchdown run to bring the score within 7. Heading into the fourth, with the game still close, Michigan State was given a chance to put together a game-tying drive. As they marched down the field, it began to look like they just might do it until a pick six. And with that, Texas A&M slammed the door closed on Michigan State, beating them 35-14. And while yes, this loss did hurt, it was ultimately overshadowed by hope. Halfway through the season, nobody would have expected this Michigan State team to even make the playoffs. But they did. And they were competitive. Next season would be Aiden Chile's senior year, and he would be in his prime. So if there was ever a time for them to make a run for the national championship, it would be next season. So we hit the offseason and began training to make an even deeper run than ever. We signed more key 4-star recruits, and we spent lots of time working with our wide receivers and secondaries, resulting in a lot of growth. And finally, heading into the third season with their success from last year, the committee was finally respecting Michigan State. They would begin the season ranked number 9th, and season 3 started off with an absolute bang as Michigan State headed on the road to face number 11 Notre Dame. Michigan State played well all game. Heading into the fourth quarter, they were primed to finish this one off. They ran the ball several times to force Notre Dame to burn their timeouts, and with a 4th and 9, all they had to do was punt the ball away and trust their defense. But then, the punt was blocked. Notre Dame blocked the punt, and they managed to scoop and score it to take the lead late in the fourth. An absolutely insane finish as Michigan State's offense would struggle to get anything going and time would expire. What an absolutely gut-wrenching way to start the season, choking away a huge game that was a literal minute away from being yours. And just like that, Michigan State starts the season 0-1 off to a rough start. However, their next matchup would be against number 1 ranked Oregon. Thankfully, they did have home field advantage, but this would not be an easy game. For the first 2 quarters, this game would be a defensive battle, the score locked at 0-0. But with 1 minute and 20 to go before halftime, Chiles would find a man open in the end zone to take a 7-0 lead. As the game progressed, Oregon began to find success as by the end of the fourth quarter, the score was 17-14. And with Michigan unable to get a stop, Oregon would run out the clock and secure a close 17-14 victory. And once again, in a huge game, Michigan State coming up just shy of getting the win and staying dominant. Thankfully, however, the team would once again manage to shake off this loss and progress their record to 7-2 on the season and ranked number 3 in the nation, just in time for their annual rematch against their rival Michigan. This game was a defensive nightmare. Heading into the fourth quarter, Michigan had scored 3 field goals to Michigan State's singular field goal to make the score 9-3. But with a clutch drive capped off by a Kerry McGarrigle touchdown run, they would take a 10-9 lead. Remember that 3-star running back from earlier? Yeah, he's already starting to make some big plays. Trust me when I say this is not the last time you'll be hearing about this guy. Michigan State would be able to hold on and run out the clock, securing them back-to-back victories against their greatest rival. Sure, this win was pretty ugly, holding on by a mere point, but all that matters is that they were still on top for another season. At the end of the season, Michigan State would finish with a 10-2 record, landing them the number 4 ranking. They would finally make their first Big Ten championship appearance in over a decade, and it was a rematch against the number 1 ranked undefeated Oregon. With their regular season matchup coming down to the wire, Michigan State was hungry to get revenge and to win a Big Ten championship, but facing an undefeated Oregon would not be easy. Fast forward to the third quarter and the game is tied 17 apiece. Michigan State would mount a nice drive down the field and managed to score off a run up the middle. Oregon would begin to drive down the field, looking to answer back, but Michigan State's defense would hold up, forcing Oregon to settle for a field goal to make the score 24-20. With the game heading into the fourth quarter, this game was all but Michigan State's. They were minutes away from stunning an undefeated Oregon team and securing the Big Ten championship. If they could win this game here and secure a Big Ten championship, it would quiet all the haters, people that didn't believe that Michigan State could win a close competitive game, thanks to the 2 that they had choked away earlier in the season. As time winded down, they punted it away, putting their trust in their defense to come up with one final stand. And while it looked like they just might do it, on this play, all of a sudden there was a blown coverage. Oregon has a wide open man, and he will take it to the house to score and put Oregon up late in the fourth quarter. Absolutely unbelievable. What was that guy doing? Oregon would manage to hold on and win another nail biter against Michigan State, keeping their undefeated season alive and winning them them a Big Ten championship. Even despite the loss to Oregon, we were slated to face off in the first round against the number 10 Arizona Wildcats. The teams exchanged blows back and forth all game to result in a 21-17 Michigan State lead heading into the fourth quarter. Arizona would get a chance to take the lead as they put together a crazy drive to score with only 40 seconds left on the clock, and it began to feel like Michigan State's season might be over. But with an absolutely insane jump ball brought down by our star wide receiver, there was still hope. And Chiles would dial in and throw possibly the greatest pass in his Michigan State career to retake the lead. And with only 18 seconds left, it would not be enough time for Arizona as the clock would expire and Michigan State was moving on to the next round. Chiles had an insane game with 308 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. This dude knew it was his final season and that any one of these games could be his last. But our next matchup would be possibly our toughest yet. Number 2 ranked Georgia. This game was an absolute defensive slugfest as Michigan State would kick a field goal to take a 3-0 halftime lead. In the second half, Georgia would score 2 unanswered touchdowns to take a 14-3 lead heading into the fourth quarter. Chiles put together a tough drive, throwing extremely tight passes to wide receivers that they were somehow holding on to. This Georgia defense was not making things easy. They would manage to drive down the field and score to narrow it to a 14-9 Georgia lead. But with a miraculous Georgia fumble, they would be put right back in the red zone and looking to score with only a minute remaining. Chiles would find an opening straight up the middle and run it in himself for the go-ahead touchdown. And our 5-star true freshman safety, Kroom, that we recruited this offseason, would come up with a game-sealing interception as he almost returns it for 6 points. The Spartans would end up winning this insane defensive battle with Georgia, and they would move on to the next round of the playoffs. And just like that, we were 1 game away from the national championship. The only team that stood in our way was number 3 ranked Kansas State. And sadly, this was just not Michigan State's game. Kansas State absolutely dominated them for 4 quarters. And despite their efforts to battle back late, they would put an end to our historic run with a 31-14 loss. This insane third season, full of ups and downs, would mark the end of Aiden Chiles' Michigan State career. For 3 straight seasons, he was our starting quarterback. And we wouldn't be anywhere near the success we have today without him leading our offense. So starting next season, we would have to find a suitable replacement for him if we wanted to continue our quest for a national championship. And things just got even more confusing as during the offseason, we would manage to land a huge 4-star quarterback prospect. And fans began to have their doubts about who would be leading the offense next season. Ultimately, the starting role would be assigned to the backup quarterback, Milivojevic. So heading into the 4th season, he would become the chosen one to lead our offense. And for the 2nd season straight, Michigan State would start their season with a matchup against ranked Notre Dame. And with a 14-10 lead going into halftime, it was looking like Milivojevic was the right choice. But as the game progressed, he began to play sloppy. Sure, he had 200 plus yards through the air, but he's also throwing risky passes and turning the ball over. And ultimately, these turnovers would destroy us as Notre Dame would find a way to come back and beat us for a 2nd straight season. After the game, they decided to bench Milivojevic for college going into the next game. The reasoning was simple. Chiles used to be our guy, the it factor. This dude could single-handedly will the offense back into games by making huge plays. Milivojevic just didn't show that same passion. So I ultimately decided to give the raw true freshman quarterback a chance. And boy, what a first test for our young quarterback, as the next game would be against a ranked Tennessee team. Early in the game, he would help give us a 14-0 lead over Tennessee, but they would begin to battle back. As the score slowly narrowed to a 14-13 heading into the second half, Michigan State would have to answer back, and they ultimately would, to put the score to a 21-13 lead. Tennessee would once again try to close the gap, but college would put this game away with an absolute laser touchdown to make the score 28-16. And with that, Michigan State had bounced back from their Notre Dame failure just a week prior and had quite possibly found their guy at quarterback. This dude had 300 yards and 4 touchdowns on the day, with only 1 interception against a ranked Tennessee team. With college at the helm, this Michigan State team would remain dominant throughout the rest of the season as they would head into their rivalry game versus Michigan with a 7-2 record. And heading into halftime, the score of this game would be 7-3. College would come out in the second half looking to get to work, helping Michigan State drive down the field. And with this absolute dime, he would put Michigan State ahead with a 10-7 lead. But Michigan would drive down the field and get into scoring position. With our defense looking to make make a stop, this slant route across the middle would burn us as Michigan takes a 14-10 lead. College would try everything to battle back, throwing this absolute dime to the back of the end zone that ended up being dropped. And then we decided to risk it and go for it on 4th down, and Michigan came up huge with a breakup across the middle. That decision to risk it and not settle for a field goal would turn out to be massive, as Michigan would play lights out defense the rest of the game, absolutely shutting down our offense. And at the end of the game, they ended up stealing back the Paul Bunyan Trophy once again. And they actually managed to play spoiler for our season. That loss to Michigan ended up being the only reason that we missed out on the Big Ten championship. Wisconsin and Illinois would get in, but we were just one win shy of making it back to the championship. Thankfully, we were still ranked number 5 in the nation, however, thanks to our 9-3 record, which meant that we did make it back to the college football playoffs. And in the first round, we were slated for a rematch against none other than Georgia. The first 3 quarters of this game were all Georgia, with a score reading 28-17 heading into the 4th quarter. Michigan State would come up with a stop, giving them a chance. College would go to work and help drive them down the field, but this Georgia defense was serious, and they would hold Michigan State to only a field goal. Now, they just needed a stop, and they came up close several times, but Georgia just kept moving the chains and marching down the field. And they would end up tacking on another field goal to their lead, making the score 31-20. This Georgia lead was starting to feel insurmountable, but in possibly the hugest play of the season, College throws up a go ball to his wide receiver, and he manages to haul it in for the touchdown. And with the 2-point conversion being good, Michigan State had managed to make it a 3-point game. And with a couple huge defensive plays, Michigan State had managed to hold Georgia to a 3-and-out, and they were forced to punt the ball away with a minute remaining. College mounted a masterful drive, scrambling for a huge gain and hitting his wide receivers with beautiful passes. He began to look unstoppable, but when trying to convert a 3rd and 20, he tried to force the ball to a receiver, and disaster struck. A diving interception by Georgia. And just like that, the game was over. Georgia had managed to hold on and defeated Michigan State 31-28. And coming off of our success from last season, many people began to wonder, was that the end of our run? The previous season, we had competed for the Big Ten championship. We had made a deep playoff run, and we were 1 game short of the national championship. This season, however, we seem to have taken a massive step backwards. We lost to our rival Michigan. We missed out on the Big Ten championship, and we even got bounced in the first round of the playoffs to Georgia. It started to seem as if we were falling back into mediocrity. But no, we still had 1 season left, and we knew we had no choice but to win a national championship. So we got back to work. In the offseason, we signed several key recruits to help bolster our defense and our receiving core. Our players trained day in and day out, motivated by our humiliating previous season. And when that next season came around, they were ready. This was it, our final season. 1 last shot to make it to a national championship. And our team came out of the gates swinging as they opened up to a 4-0 record and were ranked number 2 on the season. Their first true test, however, would be against a 4-1 USC team. A tough matchup throughout, as the score was 14-14 heading into the 4th quarter. But USC would make a fatal flaw as they tried to man cover our best wide receiver twice. Both times he would absolutely torch their defender on a go route and would be wide open for a touchdown. This would lead to us taking a 28-14 victory over USC and continuing our undefeated season. Heading into our final rematch versus Michigan, everything was riding on the line. We were 2-2 in our matchups against them, and we were going into it as an undefeated, ranked number 1 team in the nation. So we had to win this one, especially after how they ruined our season last year. This one was personal. And in this game, College was out for revenge. This dude torched the Michigan defense, leading us to an early 28-0 lead. Heading into the 4th quarter, however, the score was 31-13, and this game was all but over. We began to get a little too greedy, and College turned the ball over for a pick 6. Suddenly, the score was 31-20, and Michigan had a chance. On the next drive, College had a wide open man, but on a miscommunication, he underthrows the route straight to a defender. And with Michigan breaking free for a huge touchdown pass across the middle, and with a 2-point conversion, this game and our season was suddenly on the line. College would help keep the chains moving as we progressed down the field and we got closer to scoring and putting this game away. But the Michigan defense began to step up, making huge plays and ultimately forcing us to kick a field goal. This meant Michigan would be given one final drive, and they began marching down the field as time was expiring. And as they entered the red zone, it began to look like they might do it again. They might spoil our season. But thankfully, our defense was able to come up with a clutch red zone interception to seal the game and keep our undefeated season alive. Finishing out the season, we would only end up losing one game, which would land us back in the Big Ten championship. And this time, we were matched up against a 9-3 Penn State team. And this game was not even close. College would get our offense rolling with key passes and scrambles, resulting in multiple touchdowns. And with our defense playing lights out, we managed to defeat Penn State 27-10, meaning Michigan State had won their first Big Ten championship in over a decade. And after coming so close just 2 seasons prior, this win felt all the more deserved. But the season wasn't over, because thanks to our Big Ten championship win, we were able to clinch the #1 spot in the playoffs, gifting us a bye week. Heading into the second round, we were slated to rematch against NC State. Unfortunately for them, our team was on a tear this season. We got off to an early lead of 14-3, and we managed to extend the lead even further off a College scramble touchdown. The final score would end up being 21-13, as we were able to hold on and outlast NC State, winning us the game and advancing us back to where we were just 2 seasons prior. And the opponent standing in our way of making the national championship this time? Coastal Carolina. A bit of an odd team, sure, but we were not about to underestimate them, as they had made it this far. They actually began the game up 7-0, but we quickly answered back with a touchdown of our own to tie the game. And a College scramble late in the third quarter would put us up 21-7. And now all we had to do was hold on to our lead. Coastal Carolina would drive down the field and score another touchdown, but when attempting an onside kick, we were able to successfully recover the ball, and just like that, the game was over. Finally, after 5 grueling seasons of ups and downs, and after last season's disappointing end, we had battled back and we had made the national championship. And at the top of the mountain, the only obstacle left standing in our way was the 12-3 Texas Longhorns. We began the game by running the ball down their throat, a bit out of character for a team that normally is known for passing the ball. But ultimately, Frazier was able to cap off the drive with a touchdown and give us an early lead. Texas would try to get something going on offense, but our defense was able to hold firm and force them to punt the ball away. The next drive was tough, but College was able to help keep the chains moving. And when nobody expected it, that 3-star recruit from earlier I told you about, he took off for a huge touchdown run to put us up 14-0 over Texas. And just when it began to seem like Texas couldn't get anything going offensively, they snuck this absolute laser of a pass right in a narrow window to help bring them back into this game. And after we went 3 and out, Texas would begin to drive once again, and they managed to cap it off with another score to tie the game back to 14 apiece. We could not afford to choke this game away, not like the games that had come before. We had to prove that we were capable of closing out these close games, especially on the largest stage in college football. College would end up getting one last drive before halftime, and he would make a few insane throws to keep our offense moving. And he would ultimately cap it off with a quarterback run to give us a 7-point lead heading into halftime. And I wish I could say the rest of this game was exciting, but it turned into a defensive slugfest for the next 2 quarters. The score remained 24-14 until late in the 4th quarter. And on 4th and goal, College delivered a laser into tight coverage, securing the dagger touchdown to make it 31-14. And that would prove enough to win us the national championship. We had actually done it after 5 seasons. And what an incredible 5th season this had been. We managed to defeat our rivals, Michigan. We managed to win the Big Ten championship. We almost went undefeated, and we managed to come away with a national championship. And with that, the story of Michigan State's rebuild comes to a close. Thanks for watching.